guys, welcome back. We will talk about Singapore as the Horizons East episode 4. Yes, the most improbable success story in history is Singapore, a tiny island with no natural resources, no oil, no nickel, no fertile land, so small you can drive across it in under an hour. Kicked out of Malaysia in 1965 and left to fend for itself. Its founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew reportedly cried when independence was forced upon them, not tears of joy, but of fear. How would this little red dot survive? Fast forward 60 years, Singapore has the third highest GDP per capita in the world. It's a global financial hub rivaling London and New York. It's the world's busiest transshipment port. It's home to regional headquarters for hundreds of multinational corporations. It punches so far above its weight that the phrase punching above your weight doesn't even capture it. Here is the paradox: Singapore succeeds in almost everything conventional development wisdom said you shouldn't do. It's not a democracy in the Western sense. One party has dominated since independence. It has strict laws that critics call authoritarian. It's expensive, highly regulated, and has virtually no welfare state in the traditional sense. And yet, it works spectacularly. So, what's the Singapore model, and can anyone else replicate it? Start with geography. Singapore sits at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, right at the crossroads of major shipping routes between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. In the age of maritime trade, location matters, but plenty of places have good locations and remain poor. Geography is opportunity, not destiny. What Singapore did was ruthlessly optimize every advantage it had. The port wasn't just functional, it became the most efficient in the world. Ships could dock, unload, reload, and depart faster in Singapore than anywhere else. Time is money in shipping, and Singapore saved your time. But the real genius was recognizing that in a world without natural resources, the only resource that matters is human capital or human power. Lee Kuan Yew bet everything on education, meritocracy, and attracting global talent. English became the language of business and education. Singapore a competitive edge in global commerce. Schools were world class. The best and brightest were identified early and groomed for leadership. And then there is governance. Say what you would about Singapore's political system, but it is ruthlessly efficient and remarkably corruption free. In a region where bureaucracy can strangle business and corruption is endemic, Singapore offers something radical: predictability. Rules were clear, contracts were enforced, the government worked. For businesses looking to operate in Asia, Singapore became the obvious choice for regional headquarters. The tax system is another masterstroke. Low corporate taxes, no capital gains tax, territorial tax system. Singapore made it a magnet for capital. Critics call it a tax haven. Singapore calls it competitive tax policy. Either way, money flooded in. Then there's the sovereign wealth funds, GIC and Temasek. Singapore took its reserves and invested them globally with a long-term perspective. These aren't just savings accounts, they are sophisticated investments vehicles that have generated enormous returns. Temasek's portfolio is worth over 300 billion USD. GIC managed 600 billion. That's extraordinary wealth for a nation of under 6 million people. But here is where it gets interesting for Southeast Asia's future. Singapore is now facing challenges that its old playbook can't solve. First, there is the succession question. Lee Kuan Yew's generation built Singapore. His son Lee Hsien Loong led for nearly 2 decades and just passed the baton to Lawrence Wong in 2024. Can the system sustain itself beyond the founding generation and its immediate successors? Does the PAP's dominance remain inevitable, or are younger Singaporeans hungry for more political pluralism? Second, there is the inequality problem. Singapore is wealthy on average, but the gap between rich and poor is widening. Housing costs are astronomical. The pressure on young people is intense. Academic, professional, social. Mental health issues are rising. The social compact for decades work hard, follow the rules, prosper feels increasing the strain for the younger generation. Third, there is the talent crunch. Singapore has always imported talent, but the pace has accelerated. Roughly 40% of the population are non citizens. This has created social tensions. Locals complain about job competition, crowding, and cultural dilution. The government walks a tightrope. Too many foreigners and youth risk social backlash. Too few and the economy stagnates. Fourth, there is the geopolitical squeeze. Singapore's entire model depends on global openness, free trade, free capital flows, free movement of talent. But the world is fragmenting. US China rivalry is forcing countries to choose sides. Singapore desperately wants to stay neutral, to be friends with everyone, but that's getting harder. When the US wants you to restrict China's tech and China wants you to resist US pressure, neutrality becomes a high wire act. And then there is the question of purpose. What's Singapore for? Beyond being efficient and wealthy, the government has tried to answer this as smart nation, a hub for innovation and global city, but there is a nagging sense that something is missing. Culture, creativity, soul, these are harder to engineer than GDP growth. Yet, here is what is remarkable. Singapore keeps adapting. When manufacturing moved to cheaper locations, Singapore pivoted to services. When banking faced disruptions, it embraced fintechs. When the world went digital, Singapore built world-class infrastructure. The government isn't ideological, it is pragmatic. What works, works. What doesn't, gets changed. Right now, Singapore is batting big on several fronts. Biomedical sciences trying to become a hub for pharmaceuticals and biotech. Green finance, positioning itself as the center for sustainable investment in Asia. Digital economy attracting tech companies and crypto firms. Changi Airport expansion doubling down on being a global aviation hub. There is also the physical expansion. Singapore is literally creating land, reclaiming it from the sea. Over the past 50 years, it's increased its land area by about 25%. Tuas Megaport, opening in phases through the 2040s, will be the world's largest fully automated port. Singapore is building the future because it has no choice. It can't afford to stand still. And here is where Singapore's role in Southeast Asia fascinating gets fascinating, guys. It's more part of the region, and apart from it, it's in ASEAN, but it's also in a different economic leg than most of its neighbors. It benefits enormously from regional growth as Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and others grow. Singapore serves as their financial center, their logistic hub, their gateway to global capital. But there is also tension. Southeast Asian nations sometimes resent Singapore's wealth and influence. They see it as benefiting from the region without fully belonging to it. Singapore, for its part, tries to be a good neighbor, investing in the region, providing training, sharing expertise, but the relationship is complicated. What can other countries learn from Singapore? That's the billion-dollar question. And the answer is probably less than you would think. Singapore is a model is hard to replicate because it emerged from unique circumstances. A small population made meritocracy, feasible, a genuine external threat created social cohesion. Visionary leadership at the right moment made bold decisions possible. And honestly, a bit of luck. Timing of globalization, the rise of being in the right place at the right time. Trying to copy Singapore wholesale is like trying to copy a Formula One car for city driving. It's built for specific conditions, but there are lessons. Invest in education, fight corruption, make governance efficient, stay open to the world, be pragmatic or ideological, play the long game. What's clear is that Singapore will remain critical to Southeast Asia's future. As a financial hub, it channels investment into the region. As a diplomatic player, it often speaks for Asia on the global stage. As a model, however imperfect or replicable, it shows what's possible when good governance meets strategic thinking. The question is whether Singapore can evolve its model for a changing world. Can it maintain efficiency while allowing more freedom? Can it stay open while managing social tensions? Can it remain neutral while the world demands you pick sides? Can it build a society that's not just wealthy but fulfilling? There are no guarantees. Singapore's history is one of defying expectations, but past performance doesn't guarantee future results. What made Singapore successful in the 20th century might not be enough for the 21st century. But if you had to be bad on any country in Southeast Asia to figure it out, to adapt and thrive despite the odds, Singapore will be the smart money because that is what it's always done. That's the Singapore paradox, a place that shouldn't exist, that defies easy categorization, that frustrates simple narratives and yet undeniably works. As Southeast Asia rise, Singapore will be there part of the story, shaping the story and reminding the world that size isn't destiny. Resources aren't everything, and sometimes the little red dot can light the way. Thanks for watching, guys. Until the next episode. See you. Bye.